Stabbings, shootings and bullying seem now the norm for our children. South African school playgrounds have become battlefields. Why are our kids so violent? Let's get started. Good evening and welcome to the Democracy Gauge. I'm Bongani Bingwa. Schools were some of the key arenas in which the fight against apartheid took place. Now, fast forward to modern day South Africa, the culture of violence at our schools still lingers. But this time, it's not directed at any system, but the children are fighting and sometimes killing each other. Educators sometimes also find themselves victims to learners' rage. The latest crime statistics show the number of child killers has risen, listen to this, from 46 to 736 over the past 4 years. An extraordinary figure. According to 2012 research by the Center for Justice and Crime Prevention, at least 22% of high school learners have experienced some type of violence. It's just really, really shocking. And of course, what that means, researchers are also attributing this behavior to violence that the children are exposed to, either at home or the environment in which they grow up. And that leads us to our poll question tonight. Who do you blame? Television, video games, social media for the high levels of violence in our schools? You can choose from our standard 3 colors. Green is for yes, yellow is for maybe, and red, of course, is for no. And you can interact with our poll topic on Facebook and Twitter. Remember our hashtag SABC News and hashtag SABCDG25. We also welcome your WhatsApp videos, 065-862-4548. Now, our producer, Lindiwe Mabena, has visited a Gauteng school that was recently rocked by allegations of sexual violence.
This school was a crime scene just a week ago. A 15-year-old boy fatally stabbed his 14-year-old counterpart with a pair of scissors. This is just one of the various types of violent incidents gripping South African schools. In July, rape claims surfaced at this school in Vosloorus. 2 matric boys allegedly raped a grade 9 learner in the toilets. They were charged, but the case was dropped due to insufficient evidence. These matric learners say this incident has shocked and saddened them.
But this
violent behavior is not the only social ill dogging the school. Drugs and alcohol abuse are also said to be rife.
Drugs la esikolweni azana abantwana abaningi ngendlela yokuthi dewe amaningi akhona la esikolweni bayawathengisela abanye abantu khona namapilisi intashi ayazi intashi khona nentashi bayibhema ngempumulo bayohlanyela bomemo aba athendi isikolo sona siyazama yabona by all means ukuthi sibiza amaphoyisa beze sometimes bazosesha yabona ama drugs maka still abazithola izinto ezinjalo ngoba kuba ngathi nabantwana besikole baba batsheliwe ngathi ukuthi amaphoyisa yeze.
The problems at these schools mirror our society and other schools across the country. South Africa has a historic violent social system in which violence is used to resolve problems. It's been with us since the days of apartheid, and it doesn't seem like it will be a thing of the past anytime soon. Our schools, homes, restaurants and streets remain unsafe. According to the Center for Justice and Crime Prevention, violence in South African schools mostly takes place in the classroom. It often occurs when teachers are unable to manage and control their class, or when the class is left without supervision. Sports grounds and playing areas also cited as violence hotspots. While teachers also fall victim to children's wrath, the majority of school violence is learner on learner. One of the learners from Tutolisedi Secondary School believes that a lack of discipline from home is one of the causes of the misbehavior by some of their counterparts.
Ngisho kuyadependa ngokuthi umzali umphatha kanjani umntwana wakhe from ekhaya, so khona lesi sizwe lethi control semanzi, so Yeah, that depends ukuthi like umntana ubuya ekhayeni elinjani. Obvious now adopta leyo treatment leyo abamtreata ngayo ekhaya.
In a bid to stem this scourge, government has made various interventions, including hosting a school safety summit.
The school is a mirror of what is happening in society. When we deal with areas where there's lots of drugs, you also see that we have big problems of having to really deal with kids who are runners in our schools and all sorts of things. So again, it's challenges which are out there in the society being transported or being brought into the schools.
Increasing security at schools and encouraging active parenting are some of the resolutions taken at the Gauteng Regional Conference. As efforts continue to make South African schools safer, there are calls for adults to start treating others with kindness and respect, including their children, instead of just preaching about it. Mamonyane, SABC News, Fosloras in Ekurhuleni.
Some really disturbing visuals in that piece. Thank you, Lindiwe. Now, joining the conversation in the studio with me are child rights activist Dr. Shaheda Omar and Safer South Africa Foundation Gauteng's regional coordinator Edna Mamonyane. Good evening to you both, and thank you so much for joining us.
Good evening to you too.
Dr. Omar, let me start with you. I mean, you saw in that piece, it's common wisdom that whatever is happening in the home is likely what we're going to see reflected in our schools. So what is it then that makes our children so violent? Is it purely about what they're seeing in their homes?
So I'm glad you've asked that question, because we cannot isolate a single causal factor. I think it's a combination of a number of risk factors that children are exposed to. Yes, the children are exposed to interpersonal violence, domestic violence, community violence, but it's bigger than that. The children do not have adequate role models, mentors. It's not always about the absent father syndrome, because sometimes fathers are present but emotionally not connected or available. And again, the adversities, I think we have to look at the easy access and availability to substances. We're seeing the scourge of violence that is creating these kind of situations where children lose control. And often we also need to look at the behaviors. It's not just the behavior. Beneath the behavior, there's feelings. Beneath, if we unpack those feelings, there are needs. We need to actually go down and see what those needs are. So it's a combination of a number of risk factors.
Edna Mamonyane, your experience with policing would suggest that you have obviously some input in this as well. We can't really talk about a safer South Africa if our children are not safe.
We can't talk about safer South Africa when the children are not safe. The children are not safe. I always say, and when I go to places, even when I was still working that, the child is not the child for doctor only. The child is the child for the community.
It takes a village.
It takes this village. We were brought up, when I do wrong and I see the auntie next door or the uncle in the same street, I know when they tell my parents, hello, I'm in trouble. So for now, what the biggest problem that I've seen us as adults, we have decided to be absent and to be saying, you can't say that to my child. That is my child. You have no reason to say that. South Africa, we need to come back and say, I need to raise a young man who is going to respect the communities that they live in, a young man that will look at each and every female. The age of my mother is my mother. The age of my sister is my sister. The age of my siblings, they are my siblings. So I can't just watch if somebody does wrong to them.
Here's the difficulty. I mean, you've seen with the changes in the law, for example, even issues like parents being no longer able now to spank their children. We know corporal punishment is something that's illegal in our schools. People say that's part of the reason they are reluctant to get involved, because maybe our value systems are not the same. People even blame those issues as part of why we see discipline no longer maybe what we often think it was.
I do agree to an extent, but I'm just saying, I've been a single mother, 2 boys, 2 girls. I still, when I say this is not working in my house, and they all now know, things have changed. She doesn't like it. It's not going to be nice in this household. So I'm saying sometimes individually you have to know your kids. You need to sit down. You need to find time. You need to engage. And you have to know they are not the same. They are different. They are all your 4 children, but they are different human beings. So you need to engage with them. There will be one that will not be. The 3 will be at home when you come back and they will ask you, can I go out? There'll be one who will just go out and you don't know where they are. I sit and wait. What time you come back? Let's sit down. Okay, where were you? What were you doing? Yeah. Because if anything happened, I don't know if you stabbed somebody or you were doing drugs. Must I test you? If he says, yeah, no, you can test me. I don't do drugs. I said, oh, thank you, because you're giving me permission. But I'm just saying, as parents, we need to be involved in the day-to-day of our children, even at school. My grandchildren, 2 of them, one is 11, one is 8. They came back the other day in the transport. One of their students is bullying them. I went to the transport guy and I said, I need to speak to so-and-so. I said, why do you find it in you that these other kids shouldn't be happy? If me, do that to you and bully you, how would you feel? No, I won't feel okay. I said, you see, it's not right. When I finished, I went to the parents and said, do you know that? Sit down and check what are the issues. But you know, sometimes the father is a businessman, working very hard.
That's exactly the
point.
Never
home.
Yeah, that's exactly the point I want to raise. I mean, it's in an ideal setup. We should all be involved with our kids. We should all be able to keep an eye on what's happening in our community.
Yes.
But is that always possible, Dr. Omar? Many people have many pressures in terms of work. People leave early, come back home late in the evening. Some people work even 2 jobs. Transport is an issue. There's distances between where people live and where they stay. People are fatigued by the time they come home. All of these pressures mean dealing with a difficult child is the last thing you want to do.
Of course, these are multiple challenges that one needs to take cognizance of. And as we know that many parents and many children come from single parent households. So this is a huge challenge. But at the same time, I don't think we should move away from the fact of actually dialoguing with our children. It's also looking at empathy, because I think what my learned colleague spoke to about looking at what are their challenges, what are their realities, and of course setting rules, ground rules in exchanging this dialogue and actions having consequences. So I think, of course, that is something that we have to look at, and using every platform, because we see that the media bulletins are full of violence, to actually use that as a platform to discuss.
For having a discussion, but some parents will say, we're talking too much with these kids. We're too worried about nursing their feelings. Government is working against us. This thing of not being able to spank your kids, this thing of not having corporal punishment in schools, that's a problem. That's where a lot of people will put the blame.
So aren't we just role modeling what we don't want them to do? I think practice what you preach, because we are teaching them, we're normalizing and desensitizing children and saying that it's okay when you're in a troubled situation or you find that you cannot control the situation, you resort to physical punishment or physical assault. And this is where children are learning by what they're exposed to.
All right, a lot of parents will argue that they themselves were brought up with spanking and corporal punishment. So why this generation? That's indeed the question for the hour. Who do you blame for the high levels of violence? Could it be video games? Could it be social media? Or is it what's happening on television? After the break, we'll get more of your views as to what is contributing to the high levels of violence in our schools. Right, now when it comes to the people's view, of course, we look for your input in terms of how you are seeing the issues that we raise here on the Democracy Gauge. So tonight we're asking a question based on the high levels of violence we see in our schools. The schools themselves have become battlefields, and we're wondering what's behind this violence. Here's what some of you had to say.
We have developed what's called the National School Safety Framework. This was developed in late 2015, which I think has combined a lot of good research from South Africa and internationally to say, how do you prevent violence in schools? One of the big issues that I think we have is there's a lack of implementation of the National School Safety Framework, and it seems as though it's very difficult to find evidence of how it's been implemented in schools, what are the challenges that have been experienced in implementing it. So I'd kind of advocate that we need to ask the Department of Basic Education to actually put funds aside to actually do an audit of the implementation of the National School Safety Framework in schools, and that I really think is something that can help to prevent violence. The National School Safety Framework, it kind of advocates for a whole community or a whole society approach to preventing school violence. So it's not just teachers and principals that need to prevent school violence, but parents and communities, students themselves also need to get involved. And there's so many activities that are suggested in the National School Safety Framework, from conducting school safety audits, setting up school safety committees, creating school safety plans and guidelines. So I really think that's something that government needs to have another look at.
Well, here's another WhatsApp. Dr. Omar is right by saying it's a conglomeration of things. Let's also remember parents sometimes see children for a very limited time. Actually, educators have children for more hours than parents. Secondly, discipline induced brings fear to do evil. Spanking is outlawed in home and school. Why blame parents then? Those are some of the sentiments that are coming through via WhatsApp, both in terms of a video there and a message. I continue then the conversation with child rights activist Dr. Shaheda Omar and Safer South Africa Foundation's Edna Mamonyane. So you've just heard from that WhatsApp video the issue of whether or not we have the implementation of very good principles, very good policies as far as preventing this kind of thing in our schools. Your comment on that?
Bongani, one of your viewers was just saying that they don't spend time with the kids because the kids spends more time at school.
Yeah.
What do we do when the school call us to say, come to school, let's come and discuss issues of your child, because there's no homework that's done, nothing is done. Your child is bunking school. Most of us as parents, we don't even find time to go to school and find the reasons behind. Why are you not doing your homework? Why are you bunking? Where were you when you were bunking school? Because for a week or 2 weeks, you were not at school. Where were you? Because
should it take 2 weeks for a parent to find out? That's one aspect of it, right? So the parents have a responsibility, but so do the schools, right?
Yes.
We can't maybe necessarily control what happens in every home. The department has great policies on paper. Are they being implemented?
So you raise something so critical, because in reality we have the best policies in the world. However, it's the actual rollout, the implementation on the ground. As we speak to a lot of educators, a lot of them don't even know the protocols of who to report to, when to report, what to identify, and does this actually mean that the child comes from a background of abuse, whether it's physical, sexual abuse, neglect. They actually don't know. And of course, ignorance is no excuse. So what we're saying is that this needs to be addressed immediately. It's a call for national urgency, and there's co-responsibility. Yes, parents have a responsibility, but the school institutions also have a responsibility.
But again, I put the question to both of you. I mean, sometimes the educators themselves are at risk from these violent children. So when you talk about protocols to be followed, that can often seem like, you know, some highbrow idea when you're dealing with a violent child who means to harm you.
So I think we also, as I said, we need to go to what is the underlying need of their child? What is the underlying need of those learners. What is it? What is
But in the
propelling
heat
them?
of the moment, if a learner who may even be physically stronger than you is advancing on you as a teacher, the last thing on your mind is the underlying reasons for why they might be doing so.
But it's a bigger problem, Bongani. That's what I'm saying. This is a systemic issue. We cannot be doing Band-Aid treatments. The reality is that's what we've been doing, Band-Aid, and that's why we're faced with this outrage and scourge of violence, where 73% of learners have been violated at school, and schools are a place of violence, a dangerous place.
Mum Edna, when a parent says, I'm scared of my child, I have lost all authority in the home, I'm scared of my child, what do you say?
But Bongani, then what is the teacher going to do? Because this child is not even going to respect the teacher because the parent is doing. I'll tell you, at Safer South Africa, people ask, what are you doing? You know what are we doing, Bongani? Because I'm a retired cop. We have people that are retired from correctional services, others were teachers that are provincial commissioners throughout the country. What we do when I get to school, I go to a school and I select schools where we have a problem, like your producer went to that school. I must go start with it in January.
What would you do?
What we do is when we get there, we speak to the principal, we say, we're writing letter today. Let's have an agreement, me and you, I'll be here. And we write letters to the parents to say, parents, we're going to need so many kids and the school will select. And what we do is then we don't bring people that are going to, we bring them and take them through the justice system. And these kids, when we call SABS, we say, SABS, talk to the kids, tell them who you are, what you do. When we finish, we call in, if a metro is in the area, we say metro or traffic. Then we say, NPA, come here. The prosecutor will come and at school and explain to the kids, okay, what the police have said.
You show them consequence for what they might...
We take them on a journey. We just go on a beautiful journey. I buy them lunch, and we go on this journey together. When we finish with the prosecutor, we then say, okay, mock court. We speak to the magistrate. They go sit in court and listen to a case. When they finish, they come back to school. I call correctional and say, tell the children, what do you do? Because yesterday they saw that a person was sentenced. What do you do? Says, when a person comes, we have to try and see what we do with the person. After that, then the following day, we take them to a correctional facility and say, okay, we took you through this journey. So this is, if you do anything, you disrespect teachers at school, you don't do that.
You make it real for them.
Now, you are here. Safer South Africa just lay the foundation and the platform and say, you people that are law enforcers, come here. We need children. We need to take them on this journey. We must go with them. When we finish at correctional services, we come back. Then Human Rights Commission comes and talk to them about their rights.
So you provide the whole... Let me ask this question, though. We're asking tonight about the influence of social media. We're talking also about the influence of television. So we've spoken about the home and we've spoken about the school. What about other influences that may be a factor in why some of these kids do this? In other words, we see viral videos, for example, being taken and being spread, and some kids doing this just to get the attention. What's your view on that?
And that certainly has a huge impact, a negative impact, because it's certainly desensitizing them, it's normalizing the abnormal, and it's also giving children the platform and the license to say, if you find yourself in a situation, you can mimic this or reenact it, because often children are bombarded with these images, so the visual images, there's all the sensory experiences, it sits on their foreground. When something sits on your foreground, what actually happens? That the person is not able to process that or able to actually make sense of it, to say this is not okay, that is okay. And when they find themselves in a situation, it's post-trauma, post-traumatic stress, and a lot of that is what children are plagued by. It's not only just violence via social media, printed media, television, but it's also the whole community violence. So it's a combination, these multiple forces of violence that impacts negatively, cognitively, socially, and emotionally on the child.
So you know what we're going to do? We're going to go on another march. We're going to carry the placards. We're going to say no to gender-based violence without asking ourselves, the tough questions we need to as a society. Thank you very much to the two of you for joining me this evening on the Democracy Gauge. After the break, we'll look at, of course, one of the historic events that happened on this day following our first democratic poll. Stay with us. This week in 1994, we look at Nelson Mandela's government's handling of a fallout within the army during the integration of former freedom fighters into the old South African Defence Force.
We would like that this integration process should proceed as smoothly as possible.
Amajoni ayisakulwela inkululeko athi anamalunga aqokelelwa kwisigidi asalindele ubandakanya kumkhosi wezokhuselo.
We feel that some of our members, and a significant number at that, have not been included in the process.
Imo iphantse yahambi kule komiti ngethuba amalungu eSouth African Cape Corps nawo ayisakuba ngumbutho wamajoni abantu bebala kumkhosi wokhuselo wamandulo etyhola urhulumente ngobuhlanga.
We were supposed to be part of the SANDF, but as a matter of fact, we were part of the former SADF, and they've neglected.
Amalungu eSACC oyikise ngomangalela urhulumente kwinkundla yomgaqo-seko ukuba imfuno zawo azihoywa. Manelisi Dubase, SABC, eParlamente.
The teething problems of our young democracy. All right, before we go, let's take a look at the results for tonight's poll. There they are on your screen. Until the next time, from me, Mamonyane and the team here at the Democracy Gauge, ubusuku benzolo. Good night.